Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. I'm Ty Glenn. Hopefully, you guys are having a great Monday. Got lots of NHL news to discuss, so make sure that you stay tuned in to the end of this episode. As always, do me a favor, hit that like, subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're listening to this on audio platform, make sure to follow the Hockey Talk with TG podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11:30 a.m. to noon Central Time, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. each time. So we want to make sure that you give this podcast a follow so you can stay up to date on the latest NHL news and the latest episodes of the Hockey Talk TG podcast. Just a reminder, basically the same thing that I said throughout this whole entire series of the Stanley Cup Final. I will be live at 11:30 a.m. Central Time doing my episodes of the Hockey Talk TG podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So after every game of the Stanley Cup Final, I will be live on the Hockey Talk TG podcast, recapping each game of the Stanley Cup Final. So this is the podcast to be. You're not going to hear this kind of news anywhere else. So make sure to hit that notification bell, hit that big red subscribe button on the bottom right of your screen if you like watching the podcast on YouTube, or if you're an audio listener like myself, make sure to follow the Hockey Talk with TG podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Again, we are live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11:30, recapping each game of the Stanley Cup Final. But before we go ahead and get into the NHL news for today, if you bought my previous books on Amazon, you will know that I'm an author. And on this episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast, I want to share two more of my books with you guys. So one of these books is Breaking Barriers, a Black Man's Hockey Ice League Journey, a Black Man's Ice League Journey. I wrote this book. It is about a black man trying to start a predominantly black hockey league. I wrote this book because to grow the game of hockey and to see more and more people play it, let it be more diverse, have people from different backgrounds playing hockey and not playing sports like basketball, football, baseball, and most definitely not soccer. I am not a huge fan of soccer. I hate soccer. I hate soccer. Just never had an interest in liking soccer. So I definitely don't want to see nobody else playing that. And plus, it's not a manly sport compared to hockey. So, yeah, that's why I wrote this book, just to grow the game of hockey. So, even though, it's about a black man trying to start a black hockey league, it's more than that. It's about growing the game of hockey and making it more diverse and having people from different backgrounds play this great and fantastic game of hockey. So that's what this book is about. And I had another book. This was my most recent book that I wrote, From Icebergs to Ice Kings. So this is about a hockey team in Chicago, and they get invited to this tournament called the Pond Hockey Classic. They try and win the Pond Hockey Cup. They try and win the Pond Hockey Cup, sort of, in this book. And this takes place in Lake Louise, Alberta. I thought it would be a great setting for this kind of book. So this is another one of my books. It's about a hockey team from Chicago called the Chicago Icebergs. They get invited to the Pond Hockey Classic in Lake Louise, Alberta, Canada. People view them as not a good enough team. This team wasn't getting enough sports coverage. They thought they sucked. They weren't doing as good, but they shocked the world. Well, I don't want to give too much away, but you guys know what happens at the end. So, or you should kind of expect what happens at the end. I don't want to give too much away because I want you guys to read the book for yourselves. So make sure to get your copies of my book on Amazon. I have published at least 6 books. I am a journalism and sports media major in college, so part of that is me writing my own books. And these are my books right here, from Icebergs to Ice Kings and Breaking Barriers, a Black Man's Ice League Journey. So make sure to get your copies of my book on Amazon. I will put the link in the description so you guys can go there and get your copies today. These are really, really great books to read. Like I said, I have 6 books out on Amazon right now. I am a journalism sports media major. And part of that is me writing my own books. So, and if you guys have an interest in sports journalism or you want to be a journalism major, I encourage you to do the same thing. I think it's going to stand out for yourself on your resume. If you want to be an aspiring journalist like myself, one of the things I highly encourage you to do is to start writing your own books. So, yeah. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the NHL news for today. So we're going to be starting off recapping Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. And Brad Marchand came up clutch again. He's become Canada's public enemy number 1 because of his days dominating the Toronto Maple Leafs when he was with the Boston Bruins, and now dominating the Edmonton Oilers on the Florida Panthers. Brad Marchand, he had 2 goals in the Panthers' 5-2 win over the Oilers on Saturday. 1 goal in the first, another one in the third. 2 of the most nastiest goals I have seen from Brad Marchand. He's up to 10 goals of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And fun fact, Brad Marchand is now the first player to notch 5+ goals in 2 separate Stanley Cup Finals, 2011-2025, since Mario Lemieux did it with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, great conversation to be in for Brad Marchand. And again, both of the goals were gross. He had a goal right off the face-off. Face-off took place center ice. This, I believe, was like 9 minutes and 16 seconds into the first period. Face-off at center ice. Panthers win the face-off. Brad Marchand dekes through a couple Oilers defense, and he scores past Calvin Pickard. I think that goal ended up being top shelf past Calvin Pickard. And then he had another greasy goal where he went around Jake Wallman and scored 5-hole past Calvin Pickard, which that goal was in the third period. That made it 3-0, and that goal turned out to be the game winner. And the Panthers lead this best-of-7 series 3-2. They improved to 10-3 on the road in the playoffs, which they tied the single postseason road win record with the 2019 St. Louis Blues. Of course, they went all the way to win the Stanley Cup. And the Panthers are 1 win away from repeating as Stanley Cup champions and defeating the Edmonton Oilers for the 2nd straight year. So I said off air, who wanted it more? Because as we all know, this was a pivotal Game 5 for both teams. And it all came down to who wanted it more. Who wanted it more? Who was going to be the biggest factor in this Game 5? And it turns out it was the Florida Panthers. The Oilers were not even trying in this game. Probably until they pulled Calvin Pickard. That's when they tried to claw themselves back into the game. But the majority of the game, it sucked. And they are on the cuffs to be eliminated by the Florida Panthers for the 2nd straight year. And I said this on the Hockey Talk with TG podcast, that if the Oilers lose to the Florida Panthers for the 2nd straight year, there is no coming back from this. This will probably haunt them for the rest of their lives. There is no recovery from this. I don't know if you can recover from this. This will be a haunting moment for the Edmonton Oilers if they don't get it together and force a Game 7 against this Florida Panthers high-power offensive team. But going into the game, Panthers, like most of the series, started off the first period on a strong note. They got 2 goals in the first period. One from Brad Marchand, another one from Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett is up to 15 goals of the Stanley Cup playoffs. He is the playoff leader in goals, and he is most likely to win the Conn Smythe Trophy when it's all said and done. Sam Reinhart also scored in this game. Eetu Luostarinen had a goal and an assist for a 2-point night. He had the empty netter to ice the game away to make it 5-3. After Corey Perry scored to make it 5-2. And then he had an assist in this game, 2-point night. Sergei Bobrovsky made 19 saves on 21 shots faced in net. And for the Oilers, Connor McDavid scored his 7th goal of the Stanley Cup playoffs and first goal of this series. Corey Perry also scored for the Oilers. This is his 10th goal of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So at age 40, he is still going strong. The ageless wonder, as what some people are calling him now in this Stanley Cup final. And Calvin Pickard made 14 saves on 18 shots faced in net. So we didn't see the Calvin Pickard that we saw in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup final when he came in relief for Stuart Skinner. Which reminds me, who do you start in Game 6? So Game 6, the Oilers season, on the line. A lot of pressure is on the Edmonton Oilers than it is on the Florida Panthers. Their season is on the line, and the big question is, who do you start in Game 6? You can't keep rotating back and forth like, oh, I'm gonna decide to start Stuart Skinner. Oh, I'm gonna decide to start Calvin Pickard. Like, you can't keep doing that, especially where the Oilers are at. It's either this goalie you start, the best goalie that you have on your team, the goalie that's been dominating so far in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Speaking of which, with that Game 5 loss, Calvin Pickard has now lost his first game of the Stanley Cup playoffs because going into that game he was 7-0. Now he loses his first game of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But the question is, who do you start in Game 6? I almost said Game 5, but who do you start in Game 6? You can't keep rotating back and forth to see who do you start. It's either you start this dude like the Florida Panthers, for instance. They had Sergei Bobrovsky all the series. Oilers should have a goalie like that. You can't keep rotating Stuart Skinner. You can't keep rotating with Calvin Pickard. But if it were up to me, I'd probably start Stuart Skinner in Game 6. I know he's gotten pulled. He got pulled in Game 4. And at the start of the playoffs, he wasn't himself. But Calvin Pickard wasn't the Calvin Pickard that we saw in Game 4. And you got to remember that Game 5 was his first start since Game 2 of the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs between the Oilers and the Golden Knights, because he was injured. He got injured after Game 2. He was in net for all the game for Game 2 against the Golden Knights in that second round series, but he did not play in Game 3 and so forth until he, came in Game 4 because he was injured. He was injured, couldn't play, but they got him in for Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. And we saw the Calvin Pickard that we saw when he came in, when he turned out to be the starting goalie for the Oilers throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs until, the conference finals, and all the time he was out. So, if you were to ask me who would I start for Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final, I'd probably go with Stuart Skinner and just hopes that he has a great game for the Oilers to force a Game 7, because again, Calvin Pickard wasn't the Calvin Pickard that we saw in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. Calvin Pickard wasn't the Calvin Pickard that we saw when he came in relief for Stuart Skinner in the Stanley Cup playoffs starting in Game 3 in the first round against the LA Kings. He wasn't that Calvin Pickard. Calvin Pickard wasn't the Calvin Pickard that was 7-0 in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He wasn't that Calvin Pickard. So I probably would start Stuart Skinner heading into Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final Tuesday night. And hopefully, just hopefully, he has a great game. Because as I said numerous times, I want to see Connor McDavid win a Stanley Cup. He deserves a Stanley Cup. He is one of the best players in the league, if not the best player in the league. And he's had all these awards that he's won. He's taken home an Art Ross. He's taken home a Ted Lindsay Award. And He's taking home all these other awards. He's doing all these other great things, but he has no Stanley Cup on his resume. And I would love to see Connor McDavid win the Stanley Cup. Plus, as an American, I would love to see a Canadian team win the Stanley Cup, because the Canadian team hasn't won the Stanley Cup in over 30 years. Last Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup was the 1993 Montreal Canadiens. They got it done against the LA Kings. That was the last Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup. The 1994 Canucks couldn't do it. The 2006 Oilers couldn't do it. The 2011 Canucks couldn't do it. The 2021 Canadiens couldn't do it. The 2024 Edmonton Oilers couldn't do it. And the 2025 Oilers, fingers crossed that they get it done. That this is the year that they win the Stanley Cup. Because I said this on the Hockey Talk with TG podcast before, one of my most recent episodes during the Stanley Cup Final. If the Oilers lose to the Florida Panthers for the second straight year, there is no coming back from it. They can't come back from it. I don't even know if they can recover from this. I don't even know. There is no coming back from this. And again, this will haunt them for the rest of their lives. There is no coming back. There is no guaranteed, hey, we will be back here next season. Because 9 times out of 10, we probably won't see the Oilers in the Stanley Cup Final. We probably see them in the Stanley Cup playoffs, though. But we don't know if they can reach the Stanley Cup Final for the third straight year. So it's definitely cup or bust. And Connor McDavid said, lock in, dig in. This is not good enough. And we haven't seen the Oilers' best in this series. We haven't seen a lot of we've seen a lot of Leon Draisaitl because he's had 2 overtime goals in this series. We haven't seen a lot of Connor McDavid. We need to see more for Connor McDavid and more from Leon Draisaitl. A dynamic duo. It can't just be one guy stepping up and the other guy not doing so good. It's got to be both. We got to see the dynamic duo of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl step up in this series. And again, Leon Draisaitl has 2 overtime goals in this series. He's been clutch at some games in the series in Game 1 and Game 4. So he's been there in the series. Connor McDavid just been ice cold. And this special teams for the Oilers, this has not been their best. The special teams for the Oilers have not been their best in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And especially not in the Stanley Cup Final. That is a problem. Special teams is going to have to get it together, because I know Zach Hyman is out. He was a key player for the Oilers power play unit, but I still believe the Oilers have it. Even though the stats say otherwise, I still believe that the Oilers have a great power play unit. And I know it's tough not seeing Zach Hyman. I almost said Shaq Hyman for a second. I know it's tough not seeing Zach Hyman in the lineup. I know it's tough not seeing him in the lineup. You want him in the lineup. He's going to be one of those X factors for the Oilers. He's out with a wrist surgery. But still, the Oilers have got to step up. Got to step up in the series. They need to play Game 6 Tuesday night like it's a Game 7. They need to dig in. They need to bring out their best. I know they're going into Amerant Bank Arena in a hostile environment. I said this on the Hockey Talk with TG podcast before. It's tough to play in that arena, especially come playoff time. It is tough to play in that arena. I know Panthers fans just bring it every single time. That is a loud, electrifying arena. And with the Panthers home crowd behind them, 9 times out of 10, the Panthers are always going to come out strong and come out with the win. The Oilers need to say otherwise. And I did pick the Oilers to win the Stanley Cup. I picked them to win the Stanley Cup before the season started. And I'm hoping. I am really hoping, fingers crossed, that they get it done in Game 6. They force a Game 7 back in Edmonton Friday night. Drag the Panthers back to Alberta for a Game 7 Friday night. Please do it. Please come out strong. Please bring your best in Game 6. You got to play it like it's a Game 7. To force a Game 7 for Friday night. Drag the Panthers back to Alberta. Give the Oilers fans some hope, because I know the Oilers have come up big, at least in Games 1 and 4 of the series. But overall, from Games 1 through 5, overall, if you're asking me overall how have the Oilers been doing this series, it has not been good. And we need to see the Oilers' best for Game 6 Tuesday night in Sunrise if they want a chance to force a Game 7 for the second straight year Friday night in Alberta. But Game 6 will come on again Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. This game will air on TNT, True TV, and HBO Max for you guys to watch. Pivotal Game 6 for both teams. Will the Panthers repeat as Stanley Cup champions? Will they take home their second Stanley Cup in franchise history? Will they defeat the Edmonton Oilers for the second straight year? Or will the Oilers force a Game 7 back in Edmonton Friday night? We'll just have to see for Game 6 Tuesday night in Sunrise. The Stanley Cup will be in the building for Game 6, but hoping the Oilers will not lose to the Panthers for the second straight year. But of course, the Panthers are looking to win the Stanley Cup on home ice for the second straight year. Pressure is on both teams. The pressure is on both teams. More pressure on the Edmonton Oilers than it is on the Florida Panthers. So it's going to be a great Game 6. Probably going to be an intense, tight Game 6. We'll just have to see what happens. Last year's Game 7, and I know I'm saying this because Game 6 could possibly be the final game of this series if the Oilers don't get it together. But last year's Game 7 ended in a 2-1 win for the Florida Panthers. Sam Reinhart with the game-winning goal in that Game 7. So Game 6 could be possibly the final game of the series. And it could be a close one. It's going to be, I imagine this being an intense, tight Game 6 between the Oilers and Panthers. So that's what I imagine. At least that's what I'm hoping for. But now we're going to give out the keys to the game for Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final. And for the Oilers, start fast or start strong or fall behind. And for the Oilers, the first period, they have struggled. They have struggled in the first period overall through this series. I think it was, what was it, Game 3? No, it wasn't Game. It was probably Game 2. I think this was Game 2 of this series where the Oilers had the lead after the first period. It was either Game 1 or Game 2 because I believe this game was in Edmonton. And it was after Game 1 or Game 2, at the end of the first period, the Oilers had the lead. Overall in the series, it has not been great. So start strong or fall behind once again. Oilers have been outscored 11-4 in the first period of this series. Jumping out early in this game is critical to avoid playing from behind again. Because you guys saw how it was in Game 5 where the Oilers didn't really have any momentum in the game until after they pulled Calvin Pickard. They got goals from Connor McDavid, his first in the series. You need to see more from McDavid in the series. The Oilers want a chance to force a Game 7. And then they got another goal from Corey Perry. But, of course, that wasn't enough as the Panthers took the Game 5 win. So it's always good to start the period out strong. And from a Blackhawks fan to an Oilers fan, I can relate to this because the Blackhawks during the 2024-25 season, they have had trouble starting out the game strong. And they have had their first period struggles this season. So from a Blackhawks fan to an Oilers fan, I know the struggles of not starting out strong in the first period. But for the Oilers, in their case, first period is critical. Your season is on the line. Your season is on the line. You're most likely, you're on the cusp of getting eliminated for the second straight year. Your season is on the line. You want to start out the first period on a strong note. And Matter of fact, I'm going to throw a prediction out there. And I know I'm probably going to be wrong for this. But I'm hoping and I'm predicting that the Oilers score the first goal of the game. It is a stupid prediction if you ask me. It is a stupid prediction considering how the Panthers have controlled the Oilers in the first period of this series. But Oilers season's on the line. They need to start out strong. Need to play like it's a game 7. And they need to capitalize on a strong note in that first period. So I'm hoping and I'm predicting that they get it done. My brain says the Florida Panthers will score the first goal of the series yet again. But my heart is predicting that the Oilers get it done. So, and number 2, like I said before, play it like it's a game 7. You got the season on the line. You got more pressure on you than the Panthers have on them. Oilers need to lock in. In the words of Calvin Pickard, dig in. Dig in right now. You can't be playing sloppy hockey, especially where you're at in the Stanley Cup Final, down 3-2 in the series, and possibly going to lose to the Florida Panthers again for the second straight year. Leave it all out on the ice and treat this like it's the most important game of the year. Don't treat it like an average, normal, regular season game. This ain't the regular season. This is the Stanley Cup Final. Gotta treat this game like it's the most important game of the year if you want a chance to still be in this series. And number 3, special teams and the McDavid and Draisaitl factor. Again, special teams has got to come up big for the Oilers in this win. The special teams have struggled throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs and most definitely the Stanley Cup Final. Game 6 Stanley Cup Final, we need to see more from the special teams. And we need to see more from Calvin Pickard and Leon Draisaitl. I know Leon Draisaitl has came up clutch in this series with 2 overtime winners. That is not enough against this Florida Panthers team. We need to see more from both Calvin Pickard and Leon Draisaitl. Both of them, the dynamic duo, need to come up clutch in this series. So we need to see more from both Calvin Pickard and Leon Draisaitl. We don't need to see more just from Leon Draisaitl, not just from Calvin Pickard, but from both of them overall. For the Florida Panthers, lock it down. They're at home. They return to Sunrise, Florida, at Amery Bank Arena. They have the home crowd behind them. Home crowd is electric as always. It is tough playing in that building if you're the opposing team. And the Panthers, they're looking to lock it down at home and looking to close this out in 6 games. They don't want to have to go back 2,500 plus miles to Alberta for a game 7. They want to lock it down at home. So that is one of my keys to the game for the Florida Panthers. Number 2, Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett must deliver again. Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett have been key throughout this whole entire series. And Brad Marchand has 6 goals in the Stanley Cup Final. Sam Bennett leads the playoffs in goals with 15. If they produce again, if they come up clutch again, Florida's offense will reign and they will take home their second Stanley Cup in franchise history. And another third key to the game, and probably most unlikely to happen, I hope it doesn't happen, since I predict the Oilers will win the Stanley Cup. But for the Panther side, a shutout. A shutout from Sergei Bobrovsky. A shutout from Sergei Bobrovsky keeps Edmonton off the board entirely, leaving them no momentum, no chance whatsoever to get in this game. Need to see a shutout if you're the Panthers. You want to see a shutout from Sergei Bobrovsky. Don't give the Oilers any chance. Don't let goals to the back of the net. I know it's going to be impossible to get a shutout. Highly unlikely that Sergei Bobrovsky will get a shutout in Game 6. But that is just one of my keys to the game. If I'm the Panthers, I'm hoping for a shutout for Sergei Bobrovsky in Game 6. Just to leave Edmonton off the board entirely. Not giving them any momentum, any chance, nothing whatsoever to win this game and force a Game 7. Taking a look at the betting odds presented by FanDuel Sportsbook Oilers are the favorites to win Game 6 at minus 122, while the Panthers are underdogs at plus 102. Total for over and under goals is 5.5. Spread is minus 1.5 on the money line for the Edmonton Oilers. So Oilers are the favorites to win Game 6. I hope they win Game 6, but my brain is saying the Florida Panthers will get it done. But my heart and belief is saying Oilers will get it done in Game 6. Again, another coin flip or so, depending on how the Oilers will do in Game 6. It's another coin flip. Pivotal Game 6. Pressure on both teams. We'll see if the Panthers can get it done and repeat as Stanley Cup champions, or the Oilers drag the Panthers back to Alberta and force a Game 7 Friday night. Taking a look at the Conn Smythe Trophy betting odds. Sam Bennett has the best odds at winning the Conn Smythe Trophy at minus 170%, followed by Brad Marchand at, I think, plus 400 something. I probably should say percent. Sam Bennett has the best odds at winning the Conn Smythe Trophy at minus 170, while Brad Marchand, I think, is second with plus 400. Other people that could probably win the Conn Smythe Trophy are Leon Draisaitl, Sergei Bobrovsky, and maybe Connor McDavid, depending on how he does through Game 6 and possibly a Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. So this should be a great Game 6. Stories on both sides. Could the Panthers repeat as Stanley Cup champions? Could they go back to back? Or do the Oilers force a Game 7 Friday night in Alberta? Those are the biggest questions for this Game 6. It's going to be an intense one. It's going to be a tight one. It's going to be a tough one. But it should be, all in all, a great Game 6. But that's going to do it for this episode of Hockey Talk with TG Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. Really do appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button. Make sure to follow the Hockey Talk with TG Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Hit that notification bell if you will. Don't forget to get my 2 books on Amazon, Breaking Barriers, A Black Man's Ice League Journey. I wrote this book because I want to see growth in the game of hockey. People from different backgrounds playing hockey. I know the title is about a black man trying to start a predominantly black hockey league, but it's more than that. Growing the game of hockey, making it diverse, having people from different backgrounds play. Love to see that. And then from Icebergs to Ice Kings is about Chicago's hockey team. Chicago Icebergs get invited to the Pond Hockey Classic in Lake Louise, Alberta, Canada. And they make a name for themselves. They don't get enough coverage or so. Guys probably should know what happens at the end. I don't want to give too much away. But both of these books, make sure to get your copies out on Amazon. I will put the link in the description for both. Both of you guys have a great rest of your day. God first as always. Be blessed. Enjoy Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final. Possibly could be the final game of this series. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday for another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG Podcast. Take care.